Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Z.S. Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm here inside the Expo Hall at AWS reInvent 2023 in Las Vegas. And I'm joined by Jack French. You are the VP of Cloud for Worldwide Technology.
Director of Cloud at Worldwide Technology. And Z.S., thanks for the time today.
Okay, so normally here, I would interview you and ask you a bunch of things from the event. We're going to flip the script this time, and Jack's going to interview me. So ask me anything.
I love it. And first, Z.S., it seems like reInvent is back in full effect this year.
reInvent is back in full. There's apparently 65,000 people here, and they were all in the hallway when I was trying to get here.
It is crazy, but tons of energy, a lot of fun, excitement, and even the announcements I think have been great this year so far. So a few days into it,
I think there was 65,000 announcements that went along with it.
All on the first day.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts though? Key takeaways, maybe gut reaction of some of those takeaways.
Well, obviously the big news here is Gen AI. That's all anybody talks about on any show, so it had to show up here. And in fact, I think it was good for AWS to talk about what they're doing here, because there is a media perception out there anyways that AWS is behind in AI. In fact, I read one article that they're rushing to catch up, right? But when you think about how much AI AWS uses, that to me, that's a little ludicrous. I think if there is an area they're behind, though, is AI marketing.
That's right.
And I've actually talked to the leadership about that. They admit they're really not a marketing company, right? If you were a marketer, at Apple and you wanted a job, you wouldn't come here, right? Because this company really does focus on what's good for the customer. Now, with that being said, they announced Amazon Q, which is their chatbot assistant, their Gen AI assistant that's going to span all their products. It actually came from the QuickSight Q product, and the product manager, they named it after Q from James Bond.
Oh, nice.
Right, because it's the helper, right? And but in his mind, Q grew up. So it's not just for QuickSight now; it's for all their products. It's got implications to developers. It's got implications to to builders, to line of business people. And so now, if you cut across all their products, Q becomes that single interface. And actually, I think it makes it easier to use AWS products.
When in typical AWS fashion, the tools have always been there, right? I mean, the AI tools are there, but this maybe makes it a little bit more accessible for...
Yeah, well, it democratizes it, that certainly. Like, if you were going to use some of the tools before, there was a lot of heavy lifting. Go build your model, go get your data, do a bunch of training, things like that. And but now with Q being Gen AI based and natural language based, the benefit that has is you and I can do it if we want, right? So you can just issue some commands, create an application that does this, this, and this, and boom, guess what? Your application is created, right? So, and that's got some interesting implications actually for AWS itself and the way it goes to market, because historically you would think of AWS as a builder-focused company, right? They sell to builders, that's their target audience. But now, if a line of business person can create their own application, you don't need that builder. Now, I'm not saying that builder is going to go away, but the job changes and the capabilities that AWS has does migrate. And I think there is a leadership track here. I would expect to see over the years that to expand. And maybe even some dedicated events in those areas. So
one thing made me think of as you were describing that is 200 plus services, 250 wherever they're at now. Maybe Q will help bring a little bit of those services closer to some of those builders, help them adopt quicker, and of course to the business units to make them access them easier.
Well, I think it also ties the products together, right? Because they do have a lot of applications and often use them one to another. And I think AWS has been trying to make a more concerted effort to help customers buy products that should go together. Like last year they announced Aurora and Redshift coming together, and they said because people never buy one without the other, and so make it a bundled product. And I think Gen AI takes that to the next level, where you can use a broader set of AWS tools, but indeed be able to use them effectively.
And talking about integrated solutions and bringing products together, it's one area WWT loves to help our customers with, is integrating different services into ISVs or OEMs, or bringing industry solutions together for our customers. What have you heard so far from AWS, or where do you think they're going with more integrated solutions or industry solutions?
Well, I think both.
Right.
But I do think, in fact, the question of industry solutions came up this morning in the analyst Q&A with Adam Selipsky, AWS's CEO. He talked about it a little. Said there wasn't enough time in the keynote to talk about those. But frankly, I'm not sure they should be into industry solutions.
Interesting.
I think maybe they could do some industry solutions. Like if you look at the way Salesforce goes to market, they got Salesforce, marketing. They got, for healthcare, just a handful of them, right? And then their partners do the rest. that should be the model here as well. Companies like yourself should really bring the expertise to the different areas, retail, whatever, in order to help those customers adopt the technology. It's not really, to me, that's never been a core competency of an infrastructure provider. It's really more the competency of a company like Worldwide Technology.
That's a great point. I mean, taking the 30 plus years of knowledge we have for our ISV and OEM partners and integrating that in with AWS is our sweet spot.
Yeah.
And, how would you ramp up AWS that quick?
Yeah.
So it's a great call out.
Yeah. One of the other interesting announcements was the new silicon. That's the silicon wars are on, right?
Absolutely.
And people have looked at them as at the GPU or CPU layer, but what ARM has done is allowed anybody to go build silicon, right? And so Apple makes their own now, and some of the mobile operators do, and if you use Graviton or Trainium, those costs all of a sudden drop 40%, right? So it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more cost effective, and that allows AWS to really address the full stack, right? Silicon all the way through application, and it's an interesting model because one would think that locks you in, but they're so open that you can pick and choose what you want to use, or you can use the full AWS stack. But I do think the for a while, for whatever reason, the world went all software crazy, right?
Yep.
Everything will be done in software, but there are a lot of things best done in silicon.
Sure.
And especially when you get into training and inferencing, a lot of AI, that should be done in silicon. And so building your own actually does give you an advantage.
A lot of innovation there, and Intel, AMD, what Amazon is doing to theirs. Yeah. It's also can help with sustainability, if I'm not mistaken, as well, right? Better efficiency out of all of those machines is only going to help reduce consumption and power.
Yeah, what's interesting that you gotta. Yeah, with sustainability, you got to spend a bunch of money to become more sustainable.
Yeah, very true.
But I do think that is becoming a more important part of it. In fact, that is one thing that I thought was missing here. I would have liked to have seen more in the area of sustainability. In fact, if you had asked me a couple of years ago about sustainability, I would have said, nobody cares about that here. Western Europe, sure, Germany, things like that. But more and more, I'm talking to more business leaders and IT leaders that are responsible for that. And the big thing that's missing, though, is being able to measure progress towards sustainability, right? So I'd say maybe 10% of companies can do that.
Right.
And so what do they need? Well, they need data, right? And I think from an AWS perspective, they got more customer data than anybody, and I'd love to see them build a sustainability dashboard.
Well, to your point, it can be expensive to meet some of those goals, and they want to make sure that they're meeting those goals. A dashboard would be a great way to see some of that.
Anything to close that gap.
Well, so that's one thing you wish you would have seen more of. Anything else that you think was missing from this year so far, at least?
Yeah, I would have liked to see a little more in what they're thinking about with applications. AWS is again, it's they make Lego blocks, and then it's up to you to go build something with it. But they do have a handful of SaaS apps.
Right.
QuickSight, Connect, which is our contact center product.
Right.
They rolled supply chain last year. And what's fascinating about the way AWS goes to market is the .com part of their business uses a bunch of applications. Right. It had its own contact center. So guess what? They flipped that around and made it customer facing.
Yeah.
It had its own supply chain app. They flipped that around and made it customer facing. And so when you think about HR and you think about logistics and all the different things that AWS has built in-house, they could take any of those things and make them customer facing and become more of a SaaS company.
That's such a good point. You'd think there's more hiding behind the
I'm sure there's more. Yeah. So, but I think there's also a limit to the amount customers consume, and I also think that there's, they want to pick the right applications. Right. They don't want to just roll out apps. They want to make sure that when they do, they're successful. Like they have been with Connect, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, former executive, trusted analyst now. We love getting your opinion on just about everything. Curious, from a business-minded perspective, put your executive hat back on. Any other key takeaways or hidden takeaways maybe from?
Well, one of the ones is I'm glad I'm not an executive anymore. Because the world is getting a whole lot more complicated.
Right.
So it's interesting. In the old days, like when I was a CIO, we bought these fully integrated systems. The Oracles and IBMs. They just sold you everything from the application through the net, and you just rolled it in a rack, right?
Right.
You don't do that anymore. Everything's been disaggregated, everything's componentized, and then it's up to you to go put it together. And then when you start talking about cloud to multi-cloud to edge, it gets even more complicated. And so from a customer standpoint, I do think the world's gotten a lot more complex, and I think for customers it's getting harder and harder to know what to deploy and how to deploy it. Again, Gen AI should help that.
Sure.
But I do think there's there is a bit of a hump that we have to get over here.
Sure. I do feel like I'd be remiss to not at least bring up Edge. I think it's something that starts and stops over the years.
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of edge here, right?
Right, and it's a hot topic. For some, others they don't maybe understand it. Where do you think we're going with edge? What do you think?
Well, so the problem with edge is that I think there's too many definitions. I was talking with one of the CIOs from one of the NHL teams, and I asked him what he was going to do with edge, and he said, I don't really understand what edge is. Every vendor that comes in here tells me they have an edge strategy, but that's telcos, network vendors, application. So are those all edge? And so his comment was, as far as he can tell, edge is everything that's not data center. Right. Which in some ways is true.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a movement to try and analyze more data in more places, and the edge plays an important role in that.
Right.
Historically, we've seen oil and gas and warehousing, very edge-specific verticals, be interested in it, but I am seeing more interest in smart city implementations, retailers with in-store services, even healthcare to some degree. Right? So I do think we are going to see the rise of edge here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we continue to hear announcements or innovation in that space. You've brought up data a few times. Gen AI is obviously very dependent on it. It can be complex, it can be scary, it's a huge undertaking, just data in general. Thoughts on maybe announcements you've heard or data for
so a lot of it revolved around their zero ETL vision. But I do think data is perhaps the biggest challenge with Gen AI right now, because most organizations have their data scattered all over the place.
Right.
And if you're gonna try and use all your company's data to create a competitive advantage, you got to have it in one place. You got to have it normalized. You got to have it in the same format. And how many companies do you know that has that?
Yeah,
maybe Amazon.
Exactly.
Right? Maybe they're the only one. And so I think from a CIO perspective, thinking through how that happens is actually very daunting. I was talking to one of the CIOs from one of the big hotel chains, and they're taking all their data, trying to normalize it, and he's putting it all in Snowflake. And I asked him, does that scare you? He goes, yeah, it scares the crap out of me.
Right.
Because now I've got all my data sitting on one provider. What happens if they go down? Now I've got nothing, right? But he also understands that's the only solution. So you got to pick your trusted partners and work with them.
Well, and we've got in our ATC, we're building out rapid capabilities to be able to, test the development of LLMs and help figure out how to best normalize data or bring it together for our customers who are, to your point, still trying to figure out the best way to do this to truly leverage Gen AI and all of the other, data and analytics tools out there. So, I think you're absolutely right. So, I guess any other takeaways, thoughts from reInvent so far, and just this exciting year? Yeah,
no, it's good to see it back, right? Yeah. And I do think that we went through the pandemic, and last year was sort of limited attendance. So it is good to see this back in full force. The expo hall's packed. I think the opportunity for companies like Worldwide Technology have never been better, as companies need to kind of work through all this complexity and figure themselves out, like, how do I use what things. In fact, the story I gave you of the CIO that put all his data, in one place, that's an excellent opportunity for an organization like yourself to help them through that process to understand, should I do it here, should I do it here, what are the drawbacks and benefits of doing that. So
that's for me, it's a jam-packed week of meeting with executives and our partners and talking about just that and how we can help them solve problems.
Yeah, I know Ruba Borno fairly well, when especially from her Cisco days, and she and I have talked over the years about we're more and more moving into the era of the partner. Right. And so I think while it's great, we can do so much stuff, and AWS continues to roll out services, somebody's got to help them put it together.
That's right. And her keynote's coming up, where I think we're excited to hear that too. So. Yeah, well, ZKast, thank you so much. Great insights,
all right,
as
Jack.
always.
Thanks a lot for joining me here and flipping the script.
Yeah, it's fun.
Hopefully we'll do more of these. So on behalf of Jack and ZS Caravallo from ZK Research, and thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on the ZKast.